Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webcast. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for the event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap for you and lots of really interesting information, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be receiving a link post-event that will take you to the webinar on demand. We're also taking questions from the audience, so at any time during the event, if you have a question for either of our panelists, please just use your GoToWebinar control panel, submit your question, and we'll take probably about 15 minutes or so near the end of the event, and we'll go over the audience questions. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's event, Cloud Service Management, Why Machine Learning is Now Essential. Our speakers today, we have two really good ones. Sinead Glynn, who is the Offering Manager at IBM Operations Analytics, IBM Hybrid Cloud, and Jim Carey, IT Service Management at NetCool and BSM Products at IBM Hybrid Cloud. Thanks for joining me, both of you. You have long titles, you know that? Oh, well, thank you again for joining us. And Jim, I understand you are going to be kicking off the presentation, so I'll turn it over to you now.
That's right, Charlene. And I don't just have a long title, but I have the wrong title because, as with any other good company, we change jobs all the time.
Oh.
So my role now is actually running the strategic office across our DevOps and management portfolio for our management solutions here at IBM.
Well, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Really exciting and equally exciting to be here. So, of course, you introduced a little bit of my background, but now cloud service management, what it means, what we need to do to enable people to do better at it is really a huge part of my job. So I see that we're looking at the agenda now. So let me just briefly touch on how we're going to break this up. I'm going to talk about cloud service management as a thing, as what we're trying to do and how we're trying to get better, and what the outcomes we're looking for are. Then I'll hand it over to Sinead, who knows every detail about everything that's going on in cloud service management to support DevOps, to support analytics, and how we're approaching the exact set of problems that we'll be talking about. And then finally, as you mentioned, we will wrap up a little bit and have a Q&A. Hopefully there are lots of good questions pouring in, although not yet, please. Let's at least start. But Sinead, go ahead to the next slide. The first thing I like to talk about when we talk about cloud service management is there's been a transformation in what it means to be cloud. Very likely, since you've joined this call from a DevOps perspective, you're well aware of this. But cloud isn't about disassociation of operational, of capital. It's not about moving things into some ether sphere and making them all disappear. I'm waving my hands for those of you that can't see me at home. It's about a new operational model that allows us to be more agile, that allows us to be closer to our customers, closer to the challenges that face us. So this cloud operational model is pervasive everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're running in public cloud. It doesn't matter if you're starting to deploy private clouds inside of your organization. It doesn't matter if you're maintaining legacy applications inside of the traditional data center-driven organization. Everyone is trying to adopt cloud operation models that allow them to be more agile and move faster to meet the needs of their customers, to support this digital transformation. And now I'm on to talking about the next slide, of course. Now, how are we doing that and what are we doing? This is a pretty busy slide, and I'm happy to give it to you so you can look at it and stare at it long and hard during a review of the recording. But the core thought here is that the business needs, your customer reality, what your customers need and how fast they can get it is everything we're talking about when we talk about DevOps, when we talk about changing operations models, when we talk about improved agility. It's all about meeting your end user expectations, competing with more competitive applications, rapidly developed. And to get there, we're finding that application development needs to shift right into more of a production stance and think about ways to iterate through application development and deployment faster. Operations, the traditional infrastructure operations centralized team, which remains relevant, needs to shift left to work more closely with these development teams in their experience. I'm fond of saying that you have, excuse me, you've begun your DevOps journey the day the infrastructure operations team stops saying, oh no, you can't deploy that application until you show me that everything's perfect, and start saying, how can I help you deploy your application faster so that we can compete better in the business environment that we're facing? So it's a joining of forces across operations and applications and development, hence DevOps, that allows us to face forward towards delivering our solutions faster. Now that has a whole lot of challenges, so go ahead, Sinead, to the next slide, that are worth mentioning as we look at the governance challenges facing all of us. So traditionally, operations has been very much what we call a systems of record problem. And the classic systems of record that probably all of us have had some experience with is the Department of Motor Vehicles. I can't believe that's just a United States thing, although if it is, tell me what countries you don't have a DMV in, and I will happily move there. But the Department of Motor Vehicles is all about making sure that their paperwork is correct, and not at all about making sure that you have a great experience. You're there to renew your license, just get in line. Well, they have happily a monopoly on license renewals and car registrations. So they get to be that way. The rest of us, we need to move from these traditional, more staid models to more agile models that help us to be more responsive to customers. This whole transformation is about customer responsiveness and about being able to move quickly to meet customer needs. It's where the DevOps and lean processes have come from. We're moving to cloud native, as I said, not to try to get rid of capital. That's a side effect, but it's not where the huge gains are, but to be more agile, to adopt the operational model that allows us to be less centralized, to move faster, and to make sure we're running more modular processes that all link together at the end of the day. And that pause, I'm going to start saying ping, Sinead, so I don't have to say as much as we go forward. But there are linking things that go together here. And for those of you that have been trying to drive DevOps projects, you've seen these things firsthand. Because what we used to talk about as a people, process, and tools triangle of three interrelated things that allow you to move forward, I like to talk about now as the process, the tools, and the culture, where culture has replaced people, because culture and the way people interact together is what drives what people can do. So in the DevOps world, the tools have been moving forward at tremendous pace. What we find actually is that introducing new tools for machine learning, introducing experience-based analytics, introducing better topological functions and more effective operational problem identification tools, they're all great, but they're all incremental unless you adjust the process and unless the culture embraces those changes to make the surging kinds of improvements that you want to make. This isn't like, we don't want it to be like the tide coming in and receding. We don't want it to be the slow growth of technology. We want, to use a terrible metaphor, we want the tsunami to hit. We want to push forward aggressively and get orders of magnitude of improvement. You can't do that without understanding how the tools and the processes can be evolved, and those require that the culture evolves to drive with it. So if you're not attacking culture challenges inside your organization, if you're not aware of those challenges, you haven't taken DevOps seriously yet. Terrible thing to say, but something really important for you to be thinking about going forward. And that leads into my next slide, where we talk about some of the ways we're seeing enterprise DevOps adoption. I love this quote from William Gibson. It's widely attributed to the first time he saw a significant show of virtual reality technology. But the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. Well, that's true in every enterprise that I go to see. That's true for every customer that I've known and seen, that there are a lot of different things going on, and that accommodating all those different things is one of the challenges of operations today. So the top part of the slide, the new DevOps startup, is kind of the classic DevOps story. What do we have? We have a few people who are rapidly developing an application. They're highly collaborative. It's a small team. They work very closely together. They're using some chat ops solution. Maybe it's Slack, maybe it's something else. But they're informal and agile, and they're focused entirely on solving the set of problems associated with their application and upgrading it and moving it forward fast. That's great. And inside of enterprises, we have some teams like that are very aggressively moving forward. They're able to adopt fully this DevOps mentality. But then we also have some teams that are taking care of data that might be 15, 18, even 20 years old, monitoring applications and taking care of systems that aren't going to move us forward as fast. So the enterprise reality in every enterprise I talk to, without exception, is that there are some agile applications. There's some focus on how you address business agility very aggressively, and yet there are some applications that maintain their traditional roots that are still client-server, may even have, dare I say this? Of course I dare say this, but may even have data stored on the mainframe where they're taking care of the overall information. How do you manage when you have a mix of traditional operations and cloud operations where you're adopting this cloud operations model? Well, the answer is you've got to figure it out, because the focus on business agility, the focus on rapid business change, also means that you look across an enterprise and you say, for these applications, for these services, rapid change is critically important and we need to transform as fast as we can. But for these services, perhaps rapid change isn't as critical a function, and maybe instead of trying to get 4 releases a year or 10 releases a year, we're happy with 1 release a year or slightly less than 1 release a year. If that's the case, then they probably stay with the traditional service model that's typified by IT service management, the ITIL processes. All very process-oriented, all very resistant to change. Fundamentally, the idea of having multiple levels of operations, having change review boards, reviewing problems and doing deep root cause analysis is all about changing in a very slow, methodical way and ensuring that changes are introduced that can be effective. That's very good, and that's necessary, and in a lot of places, that model stays. And one of the things inherent in ITIL is this idea of different layers of operations, where you have your level 1 operations for simple problem solution, level 2, where they get slightly more sophisticated, but when things get into trouble, you have to get to a subject matter expert and get those red lights turned off. Well, we're seeing a couple of changes that are happening pervasively. One is that in enterprises that have adopted ITIL and manage with ITIL, they're still managing it. Of course, they still have ITIL processes in place. But more and more, those ITIL processes are needing to become more flexible. They're needing to be more responsive to change. And instead of being quite so, how about this change? Can we approve this change? They become more policy-oriented and more oriented towards delivering services. And this is where we talk about cloud service management, where you take the ITIL processes and the needs that you have there of recognizing what's going right, what's going wrong, the needs of identifying incidents, identifying problems, and addressing them quickly, and you approach them in a slightly different way. What we see emerging is this idea of a first responder. And the first responder is less like a level 1 operator and more like the fire brigade when the fire brigade comes to your house. The first person in the door when your house is on fire doesn't take a look around and say, oh, this is a kitchen fire, let me go call the kitchen guy. That first person through the door looks and says, there's where the fire is, how do I fight this kind of a fire? And that's what we're seeing in many more enterprises today, where that first responder isn't a traffic routing engine, but actually a person with pretty good skills that's able to attack lots of problems, establish context quickly, and address them. Because every time a problem is handed off, that means more time. And I've worked with enterprises where that can be a process that might include 7 to 9 handoffs before they get to the person that can solve them. And then the backstop for the first responder is increasingly an application person from the DevOps team, one of these full stack engineers, or at least a person that knows the application intimately. They still have many subject matter experts, so that sort of person still exists. And more enterprises are introducing a new resource in the operations team. Um, Came out of Google with some very well-regarded books, but the site reliability engineer is a hybrid operations programmer who lives for problem management, if we're thinking about ITIL. They live to understand why problems are occurring and to get rid of the root cause of the problems, whether that means changing the way an application interacts with the cloud infrastructure to make it more scalable, whether it means rewriting parts of an application, whether it means rehoming and rebasing entire bits of process and activity. The goal then isn't to shorten incidents for the site reliability engineer, but to take incidents out of the equation, to make them gone. So as we see this change, we're seeing a mix inside the enterprise of some level 1 people, some first responders, some DevOps people, some subject matter experts, some site reliability engineers. And we see two fundamental approaches to this problem. From those approaches, IBM has determined where we focus all of our energy. And go ahead to the next slide, Sinead, so I can talk about it while we're looking at it. Fundamentally, we're approaching this transformation from an ITIL IT service management structure to a cloud service management and DevOps structure by attacking three main areas that lead to more rapid digital transformation. Those are adaptive automation, where we recognize and respond to dynamic environments more effectively using machine learning, using richer analytics that Sinead will be talking about in quite a bit of detail. Focusing also on agility, because for that first responder to respond, it isn't a matter of telling the DevOps team, the dev team, to wait. We'll put this into production when we're ready. It's a matter of accepting that change has to happen quickly, and that for operations to be successful, it needs to be as agile as the development team at catching those changes and being able to understand them and establish a context in which problems can be resolved very quickly. The goal, of course, for a first responder is to identify a problem quickly. And how do they do that? They do that by looking across the problem space, creating a context that helps them to understand the environment, and then forming hypotheses that they can quickly test. Well, a more agile environment supports that kind of agility by giving them context more quickly, even in situations that are novel to them and new and perhaps novel to the operations infrastructure. And finally, we focus a lot of our attention on flexibility. Do you want to deploy from public cloud, private cloud? Are you running traditional infrastructures? Do you want to extend your traditional infrastructure to do this management, or have side-by-side management of IT service management and cloud service management? We work with customers doing all kinds of deployments like this. And the fundamental answer to the question is, you be you, and we'll help you be you. So flexibility is a watchword of everything that we do. Finally, as we get closer to brass tacks, the whole technology, the whole approach, and Sinead, it's time to move forward one more slide, is to try to reduce the life of an incident life cycle. And we'll come back to this slide, but with a lot more detail as we get into it. But the short story about an incident pipeline is that problems occur, people have to figure out what to do, and then fix them. And we know from experience that it's hard to identify problems without waiting for a phone call. And then trying to figure out what's going on is actually the most time-consuming part. And there are a number of strategies for doing that, but the ideal strategy for doing that is to have the machines put together a synopsis of what's going on and present to the first responder, here's what we think is relevant information. Do you know what to do based on this? Or even better, to have enough granularity in that knowledge, that mean time to know, to be able to take an automated action immediately upon doing that assessment. And because mean time to know is still the longest part of the life cycle, we focus a lot of attention on identifying problems before they occur or as quickly as possible after they occur, and then establishing context to make it easy for first responders to respond, and at the limit, to make it easy for automation to be created by those site reliability engineers so that the first responder no longer has to get involved. We see a problem, we identify a problem, we automate remediation for the problem, all without getting anyone else in the way. How do we use our analytics portfolio to do that? I'm going to introduce it quickly and then hand it back to Sinead, who'll tell you the long story. But the very short story is that we've invested a lot in machine learning technologies, in user experience-based technologies, and finally in expert evidence-based historical information technologies. So we start with the ambulance and chasing the ambulance. Of course, that's purely reactive. The goal here is to be more efficient, to escalate fewer problems to the first responders' attention, and to make sure that each of those problems we escalate has greater context. And toward that end, we have a lot of machine learning technologies that analyze performance data and event data and help to customize your solution automatically to the deployment that you have. That has a couple of positive effects. One is that there's less time spent trying to figure out how you're going to manage things and more time figuring out what you're managing. And as environments change faster, you don't have to spend as much time trying to catch up with them. The environment catches up with itself. So that's the reactive part. Then we try to get smarter and try to help you to be more productive and proactive. One way we're proactive is by helping you to identify what the right levels of thresholds are for performance-related attributes by monitoring everything that's going on and by telling you when things are getting out of sorts. If at 7 o'clock in the morning your system is usually 10% utilized, but at 7 o'clock this morning it's 35% utilized, you probably want to know. Traditional monitoring and thresholding systems, of course, are set to tell you when it gets over 80%, and that means you've got a serious problem already, and you better panic. Having a chance to panic in an orderly way, if that makes any sense at all, is critical, and being able to set thresholds based on expected behavior versus perceived behavior is an important capability that our machine learning offers you. That same technology also offers suites of capabilities that allow you to predict problems. And our X-ray technician looking into somebody's heart to see if their heart's going to keep working is a great concept for that, where we're actually able to predict problems emerging based on the first signs of those problems and the first signs of disrupted relationships inside of the monitored performance and event data. That can give us headlights from hours to days on emerging problems and let your first responders and SMEs start to work problems before they're impacting customers. Now you're actually solving problems before people know they have problems because we're able to detect them and bring them forward. Finally, of course, we have a lot of expert technologies and artificial intelligence solutions based on the Watson capabilities. And those add that expertise and that historical perspective of understanding how users and first responders have behaved in previous situations, giving you a lot more context to solve problems quickly. I like to think of the Watson technologies as the Hermione Grangers of the IT infrastructure management world. If you've watched Harry Potter, and I hope everyone has, but then you know that Hermione Granger is the really smart one, kind of a little obnoxious, kind of a know-it-all sometimes, but goodness, are we happy to have her around when the problems get serious. That's where Watson's going, is towards that, here's what we did last time, here's what we should do this time. Didn't you think of this? And of course you didn't, because there's too many things to think of, but it's what our machines are about. And anyway, I want to take this opportunity to hand off now to Sinead to get into more detail about all of these pieces.
Thank you very much, Jim, and hello everybody. My name is Sinead Glynn, and I'm an offering manager for IBM Operations Analytics, and my specialty is, as Jim introduced, the machine learning and the advanced analytics capabilities in the portfolio. So I want to drill in on one of the aspects that Jim identified there in the broader picture, and particularly around the adaptive automation, and why adaptive automation, one of the key benefits of using machine learning and advanced analytics in an operational context, why it is so essential as we move forward. And one of the key points that comes out in research is that from an IT perspective, automation is something that's overwhelming. That this is, the traditional methods of, I know a certain condition, I make a decision, and I automate that. That is not working in a highly dynamic world. So if it was a case that we had static workloads and static environments, the more traditional ITIL type environments, yes, that manual processing of automation and moving it from the I decide the conditions and I move forward, that does work. But the issue is in dynamic environments with workloads that are changing rapidly and staffs that are remaining constant, it's not possible to do it with manual methods. And this is where the machine learning and the automation is really essential to drive that adaptive automation. And when we talk about adaptive automation, again, it's about that being able to recognize, using technology to recognize and respond to the dynamic environments. And there's a number of levels of it that we think about. As Jim was highlighting, there's the analytics and machine learning that help you do reactive management much better. So thinking back to the emergency response team image on the previous slides, it's about helping you do that reactive management much better to be more effective, as in there's less things for you to look at. It's prioritizing what you're looking at, and it's giving you context with real-time analytics of what's happening here and now today. And then there's the next level. So this is where we're enabling proactive management, and we're utilizing the data in your environment to learn what's normal, so the machine is giving you insights and sending you events of things that are changing, and it's allowing you to get that early handle on change in such a way that you can proactively action and potentially avoid outages. And then there's the adaptive and the cognitively enhanced workflows, where bringing all of this learning together, enhancing it potentially with Watson technology and other cognitive capabilities, where we're moving to much more adaptive workflows across the organization. So in terms of really the key value that we're shooting for, Jim had the incident management image up earlier, and certainly that is something that we're driving towards. So whether we're using the insights from your event data, from your log data, from your performance data to surface the probable cause identification, that's a value that we're driving. We have some excellent capabilities in the context in dynamic environments. So whether that's machine learning, again, on your machine data in your environment, or indeed if it's advanced analytics in those highly dynamic environments where we're able to take different views of topology from different sources. We'll take the data from whatever source you have, be that your CMDB, be that insights in your performance management systems, in your Slack channels, any other source of topological data, and really resolve that in near real time so you can see the rapidly changing environments. And it's a very important capability in these rapidly changing environments where context is very difficult to understand and manage. As you move from the waterfall and the ITIL methods to the necessary dynamic and DevOps type workflows, these insights really are essential in making the right decisions and understanding what's happening in your environment, particularly during incident management. Did something change recently? What are the events or the anomalies that are happening in different parts of my architecture, in different parts of my infrastructure, or indeed in my application? The other key value that we drive is really about avoiding outages. So again, it's that ability to automatically detect those behavioral changes. You don't have to have a human deciding the conditions on which that behavior is triggered. So this is not about traditional threshold management. This is about using very advanced machine learning to learn what is normal across your environment, and it determines the abnormality, and it will send that to you so that you can actually investigate. But the key point is, as Jim outlined, it sends it so that your first responders or your SMEs or your level 1 operatives, they can take action before the service or your users are impacted. And in that digital transformation world where service is king, where it has to be on, this is an essential capability. And then there's insights to increase efficiency, obviously. So this is about, the automated noise reduction in terms of reducing the amount of things that you have to look at, and you can see the woods for the trees. And there's the automation of complex tasks. Machine learning has advanced to a point where it can automate tasks that we would consider quite complex. So things like, again, determining what is normal in your environment and making decisions on when you should alert, determining what are the groups or and patterns in your event data so that you can dramatically reduce the number of things that your operatives are looking at, and also provide better context. So these groups happen, they happen again and again. We see the pattern. So as you are, seeing a group, you can see it build out, and it's just one thing, and it gives you much better context to go back and identify what the probable cause is. So all of these things are building. In terms of the value that clients are seeing, just, kind of pull some recent simple examples here. There was a very interesting one there from NBN, and there's an article that's sourced there, but it's about the ability that, right there and then they could actually see the proof from the machine learning that it was able to identify root cause, and everyone sat there in silence for 3 minutes. You can go and read the longer article. This was one that was written in the context of NBN looking at a number of vendors and looking to how do you prove internally to folks that are very skeptical that these technologies work. So that's a very interesting article, but it's back to that culture change that is necessary that Jim highlighted at the beginning. We find that with these machine learning and analytics capabilities, there is that initial resistance. And, some of it is to do with skepticism, some of it might be to do with certain fears and trepidations around what this will do to me in my role or my job, will it make it more complex, etc., etc. But you can read the article, it's interesting, but there you are in terms of kind of reducing the mean time to repair. Again, insights to avoid outages. Again, I've just added a source there, but this is testimony that from clients that we are providing insights from monitoring data that can help clients actually act before incidents occur. And this is a key thing. And again, in those businesses that are driving that digital transformation, these are key capabilities to manage those exceptional user experiences that are required to do business in those areas. The third category there, just about the efficiencies. Again, this is a telco example. This was a very well managed environment. A managed environment where kind of the traditional grouping has been done manually and the deduplication has been applied and all of the usual things have been done. Obviously, event volumes in telcos are generally very high, but by applying the machine learning, it identified very rapidly a significant reduction again on top of an extremely well managed environment. So these are the advantages that the machine learning can do. And again, it's about those reactive, real-time analytics to help you become, faster at dealing with incidents. Utilize your operational data. Utilize the terabytes of data you have from your event, from your log, from your metrics, from your topology to do that incident management better. Apply machine learning to your performance data. Let the machine help you become proactive and help you manage to much higher levels of service delivery. And then the third category is about automate, and apply the machine learning across all of your different data points. And of course, extend it with Watson. So utilize Watson where you want to make the process more efficient or make the human more efficient at making decisions. Help Watson bring the insights to the person making the decision so they can make it much more rapidly. And that's a key part of those adaptive and cognitively enhanced workflows. So just some practical examples then. So we talked about reactive management. So this is a very kind of typical view of a managed environment. And there on the left-hand side, there's, private, multi-cloud and public sources. There's a number of performance management systems there highlighted. But the typical way this would work is that, traditional events, meaning events have been sent in, some specialist has made some decision to set various thresholds and alerts for whatever conditions it is, and they're sent into your centralized event management system. So NetCool Operations Insights then, it uses advanced machine learning to apply analytics and machine learning on top of that event, identifying clustering, identifying seasonal patterns in your event data so you can manage it much better. Is it noise? Is it something that you need to address? Is it taking resources? Or is it something that you just want to monitor and see what's happening? Perhaps the absence of that seasonality is something that you want to be told about. But also applying the weighted probable cause. So helping you when those groups are identified, helping you understand what is the probable cause so that when the event happens again and that is applied, that insight, that people can start actioning the probable cause even if the symptoms have only started coming in. So all of that then leads to the correlated groups, the reduction in the event volume, which results, of course, in the reduction in the ticket volume, but also the improved context that's coming from the fact that these are groups of events and incidents rather than individual things. So instead of getting 40 symptoms, you're getting one problem that contains 40 things. So that's kind of the traditional view and how the real-time analytics can help that traditional reactive management. Then we introduce predictive insights. So what predictive insights does is it takes the data that's already in your environment, so the environment that you're managing, and it applies machine learning. So instead of a human making a decision to send a traditional alert, the technology is making the decision as to when to send those alerts. And it's talking about, it makes the decisions on what type of models to apply to your data. It's doing things like baselining and threshold management. We have, very advanced capabilities in this area. And it's doing the multivariate analysis and the relationship discovery. And it's identifying patterns in your data that cannot be detected by simple thresholds. So things like behavioral changes in your data, a simple one would be something that has varied in the past and is now flatlined, or a change in variance, or a sudden step up or a sudden step down. So they may be behaviors within a baseline or outside a baseline, it really doesn't matter. But the point is they're very significant changes that we know are indicative of emerging problems. And the machine is looking across your millions of data points from a metric perspective, and it's looking for these key changes and notifying you. And of course, then you manage it with the benefits of the correlation, etc., from an operations management perspective and an event management perspective. I spoke then about the advanced analytics for rapid context. So again, we have a capability, Agile Service Manager, and what it does is instead of being a discovery engine, it's a layer that sits on top of that, and it uses advanced analytics to basically take the input from the various sources, and there's some examples highlighted there in the middle, and it resolves the infrastructure as it is right now. So in near real term, it can determine, what is the connection between the application or services down through the virtualized infrastructure, indeed into the physical infrastructure. And it does that by basically taking the topological and service data from various sources and resolving it into one simple view that allows you to manage. What you can do then is you can look at what the infrastructure or the service looks like right now, or you can roll it back 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. So you can see into the past of what has actually changed in my environment. And that's very valuable insight when you're looking at an incident, because as we know, incidents are often caused by change. And in these highly dynamic environments and virtualized environments, it is a struggle for operations to keep up. And this is a key capability that can give them that insight and help them to manage those environments better. Then putting it all together, this is the same view that Jim put up earlier. Again, if we look at the incident management example, so these things work together, and it's all about driving down that incident management life cycle to as short as possible, or indeed to the point where you're dealing with issues really before the incident happens, because your users or your service users have not experienced what's actually happening. So it's using the machine learning to provide that automated early detection. So that's getting the process started as early as possible for your first responders or your level 1, level 2 engineers, your SMEs, whatever, to actually start looking at that. Potentially, we're talking anything from hours to days ahead of it happening. So we have had examples of it happening quite well in advance. Depending on the nature of the behavior and the data, it can be, as I said, it can be at the time or it can be ahead of it. So it's getting to that point as early as possible and utilizing the machine to look for those key changes in the data and automating that part of the process. Humans don't have to do it. Then in the meantime to know area, again, it's about using machine learning to do that automated events suppression, that automated incident correlation. So again, you're not looking at 40 things, you're looking at one thing, and that one thing has much greater context. It's context in those dynamic environments. So when you don't know what has changed, you haven't been told, there hasn't been that handoff, it's virtualized, it's changing all the time, you can get the context and understand, okay, is some sort of an infrastructure or service change at the root of what's happening in this particular instance. The probable cause identification, so again, utilizing that broader view of the event grouping and the ability to identify what that probable cause is. And finally, of course, and not least, it's about automating the remediation. And that's reducing that mean time to fix and to verify. And it's putting it all together, pulling it into one, not dealing with one part of the incident management. It's looking at the end-to-end and really driving towards that adaptive automation. Okay, so we're on to our third part of the presentation of the webinar. So we'd like to start inviting people to think about questions, but this really is a wrap-up slide. And what we're showing here is, the various capabilities that we deliver. So in that simplify and focus area, that prediction area, and then we're talking about getting into more cognitive processes around, either augmenting the process or augmenting the staff. And I'm not going to read down through all of these, but the point of this is to show the breadth of value that's available. So be that you're focused on what capability do I need? Do I need a cognitive assistance? Do I need help in identify seasonal environment behavior? Do I need to see real-time federated topology? Those capabilities, we have solutions for them. And of course, then below we've got the products or indeed the cloud services that underpin those important capabilities when you think about the overall incident management and cloud service management in general. Okay, so call to action and Q&A. I'll pause there.
It's a good place to pause. Okay, we're looking for questions from the audience. We've gotten 1 or 2 in so far, but if you have a question for either Sinead or Jim, please go ahead and use your control panel and submit your questions, and we will go ahead and get to those questions. The first question is for you, Jim. In the successful transition to cloud service management, you mentioned process, tools, technology, and culture. I notice culture is the largest gear on slide 6. Is that significant? And Yeah, which order would you rank them in terms of leadership challenges for organizations that need to transition?
Um, and the answer is absolutely culture significant. I make it biggest. I think you could have a good long argument with me about whether it's really the biggest or not, but it's often the most overlooked. So especially as companies try to adopt machine learning and some of these predictive technologies Sinead talks about, if you're not willing to change the way you work, if you're not willing, sorry, I had a little bit of a phone difficulty there. If you're
Mm.
not willing to rethink the way that your team operates, then to make the most of these opportunities. Um, Tools help you to change your process. Process helps you to see new ways of doing work and being more successful. To make the big jumps, you need to really evaluate your culture and the way you team and operate to be effective.
Okay, great. So our next question, is the incident management implemented within IBM support organization?
I'll take that question. The incident management. So these are the technologies that deliver the ability to manage incidents with the help of machine learning and driving towards that adaptive automation. So this has been utilized within many organizations, both internally within IBM, but primarily by our clients.
All right, great. Next question is for you, Sinead. I see a number of times in the deck a graphic with the cognitive data scientist moniker. Can you
Mm-hmm.
please explain what this refers to?
Okay, yes. So this is in reference to, I suppose, one of the key aspects of the technology. So um, a lot of, I suppose, there's a lot of vendors out there that have very similarly sounding capabilities, but many of them have taken the approach really of providing a toolkit that you can utilize and you can employ folks with particular skill sets to apply that toolkit within your environment. That particular graphic refers to the fact that one of the, I suppose, the key advantages of using the IBM technology, in this particular case, it's mainly predictive insights and net-cool operations insights, is that the technology itself makes many of the decisions that a data scientist would make when applying the toolkit type solutions. So it looks at the nature of the data and it makes the decisions on which models to apply to the data. And then it also has let's say, a back-end processing ability where it tests the quality of the anomalies detected or the groups, and it makes decisions as to whether the quality of that is enough, or is it's good enough before it's presented as an event to the user. So that decision process and that assessment is made under the hood by the technology. So it's much more of a kind of a black box solution where you provide good quality data in and you get good quality anomaly detection or grouping or whatever out, rather than it being a white box or a toolkit solution where you have to come in and apply extensive services or find folks with particular skill sets to get the value from it.
Okay, great. Just a reminder for the audience, if you have a question for Sinead or for Jim, please go ahead and use your control panel. And while we're waiting for more questions to come in, Sinead, did you want to kind of go over some of these calls to action to let folks know where they can find more information?
Absolutely, sure. So I have included there the find out more will just bring you to our IT operations analytics web pages. So there's a lot of good stuff there in terms of videos and articles that are of interest. I have included some of them down below, just if people would like to get directly to links that are of interest. One of the interesting ones there actually is that we have a maturity assessment, just in terms of how mature are you and how ready are you for certain, how will you benefit from certain types of analytics and machine learning technology. So that's quite interesting. We also have some of the Forrester studies there in terms of the economic impacts of applying operations management capabilities that include these machine learning technologies, either to your operations management or your application management functions. And there's also videos there in terms of, you know, particularly on the predictive side, because that's an area that people are often interested in, you know, okay, well, what kind of value will this bring to my organization? And also, you know, what are the kind of the base capabilities? So if you're curious, they're available there. And then finally, there's the links to the marketplace links, which are the underlying offerings that are mentioned throughout the deck. If people are curious, they can navigate to there as well.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, we haven't gotten any more audience questions in, so I guess I'm going to give everybody about 8 minutes back to your day. But before we go, I do want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any of it or all of it, you'll be able to listen to it or listen to it again at your leisure. We're going to be sending out an email that will include the slide deck and a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be on the DevOps.com website, so it will be under the webinars section. We have both on-demand and upcoming webinars listed there. So if you're there, please take a look, see what else we've got going on, and hopefully there'll be one or two that pique your interest. Sinead, Glynn, Jim, Carey, thank you both for joining me today. It was a great presentation. I know I got a lot out of it, so I'm sure the audience did as well. So thanks to you both. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Charlene.
Wonderful,
Thank
wonderful.
You. Always fun. Thank you.
Great, great. Well, again, this is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.